Let's jump into our first presenter of today. We have Emily Worldwide Weber. No, actually, I'm just joking. So she said not to use this joke, but I wanted to. So Emily Weber is coming from the UK, and her topic is why can't we all just get along? But who is Emily? Emily is a UK-based independent agile consultant, coach, trainer, and speaker. She focuses on creating the right environments for people and teams to succeed. She does this by enabling effective collaboration, agile ways of working, embedding communities of practice, and leading initiatives for working skills, for growth skills and capabilities, all of which help to create sustainable change. She is always seeking opportunities to give back to the agile community. She has found several meetups, including Agile in the Ether, Agile Liverpool, Agile on the Bench, and Agile in Leeds. Actually, she has a big crowd of speakers coming to see her presentation. I hope you will like it. So please welcome on stage with a great applause our next presenter, Emily Weber.
Thank you. I feel like I would like to do a talk as smooth as the guy from the Continental advert. Like, he's smooth, right? Anyway. Hello, thank you for coming along. I hope you're not all too fuzzy from last night, and I know there's a lot of talks on at the moment, so I appreciate you being here. Okay, so I want you for a moment to imagine the best team that you could be on. You've got everything from creating ideas to getting things done and in the hands of users. You know, maybe you have all the roles that you need to get things done. You get to input into direct product direction, product decisions. You have collective responsibility for what it is you're making. You get to see users using stuff. You get to learn. You get to iterate based on what you know, what you see. You get to learn new skills, try new things out regularly, and you're a happy, well-oiled machine. Whose team is like that? Hey, a couple of people. Okay, so now let's come back to reality a little bit. And then go and find those people and find out how they do it. Okay, so my name is Emily. You had my introduction before. I'm an organisational consultant. I feel like the agile word is being pushed over there a lot at the moment, so I won't use that too much. And I'm about creating environments where people can thrive so that organisations can thrive. And I've been independent consultant for something like 8.5 years. So I've seen inside lots of different organisations. I do a lot of work in government organisations, private sector, a lot of public sector. And what I wanted to talk about today is some of the trends that I've started to see in some of those organisations, particularly at the moment. Maybe some of those will resonate with you. And I'm going to talk about some anti-patterns, some problems with those, and some things that might help improve them. So, why can't we all just get along? Such an enticing topic, right? So the trend I've seen is, I see these trends kind of towards specialisms at the sake of collaboration. So lots of dividing and lots of silos that are happening in places. And there's lots of reasons for this, and I will look into a few of those in a moment. And I'll talk a little bit about multidisciplinary teams. Excuse me. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to share 3 anti-patterns that I've seen with you, and I see if these resonate with you. So an anti-pattern it's a pattern that lots of people use that they think is going to solve a problem, but actually does quite the opposite. And lots of people seem to use them. It feels like the right thing to do, but often it has kind of negative consequences. The first anti-pattern is one role across many teams. Now, obviously, in this picture, there is not one role across many teams. There's one team. So imagine this is a team. At the top there, this in blue, we have a designer. So for me, this is a multidisciplinary team. It has all the roles that they need. They have developers, they have designers, product managers, everybody working together towards a common goal. So this is a designer here. She is called Anita. She gets to work closely with everyone. She gets to collaborate. She gets to input. Brilliant. The organisation then go, oh, we've got another team. They're really important. We need to set those up. And they need a designer. So we're going to take Anita. We're going to split her in half. And have half her time on this team over here and half her time on this team over here. So she has to start skipping some of the stand-ups, skipping some of the planning meetings. She's not involved in absolutely everything. She starts to find that she's playing catch-up and doesn't always know what's going on, and doesn't always know why certain decisions have been made. And then can you guess what happens? Another team. So now Anita is split between these three teams. She's got no idea what's going on half the time. She's being dragged in every single direction. She's got no headspace. She's got no time to think, no time to be creative. She can't be in hardly any of the planning sessions, any of the stand-ups. She's told there's equal priority between everything, and she starts to be seen as the blocker. So the rest of the team is saying, well, we can't do stuff because we're waiting on Anita to do stuff. So she's really dissatisfied, and she's lost a lot of motivation. The organisation thinks this needs to happen. She wants to please people, so she thinks, I don't want to be the blocker, I'm going to do this. Does anyone feel this? Is anyone in this situation? Anyone Anita here? It often happens with testers as well. I think they get dragged across lots of different roles and then get blamed for everything. So aside from the fact that, if you're split in this way between teams, you literally don't have enough time in the day to attend everything. There's also a lot of time spent context switching. So this is from a paper called Impact of Task Switching and Work Interruptions on Software Development Processes. And they say in this paper, context switching, splitting your time between multiple things, you can spend a lot of time kind of ramping up and ramping down between those things. And I circled this here because, according to this graph, it says if you're working on 2 projects a week, it could mean that you're spending up to 5 hours a week context switching. I think the more complex the project is, the more detailed it is, the more time you spend doing that. You're trying to catch up, understand what's going on, try and get yourself back into it. So if you're working on 3 teams, it's not that you've got a third of your time on each team, you've got a third of your time plus all this extra time as well. So it's really difficult. And then it makes it very difficult to actually get involved with the work. Anti-pattern 2. So this is something that I've seen a lot recently, which I call product versus engineering wars. So this is where an organisation has split itself into these 2 big silos. Product, which might include things like design and user research and those kind of things, and engineering, which might also contain things like data and testing or anything that's kind of considered vaguely technical. And creating these kind of different cultures across the 2. Does anyone have this? I see this one a lot. There's this article, I'll just say, I think I'd be remiss here not to mention domain-driven design, because it feels like the theme of the conference. I feel like I should have put, thank you, Aslam. I feel like I should have put a picture of the book here. So if you're split between and you don't have context of what the business needs and products aren't inputting to what engineering is, this is a problem. So there's an article on Martin Fowler's blog post written by Rick Kick and Kennedy Collins, which it's a series of posts about bottlenecks, and I think this kind of sums it up nicely. See, the roles may vary, but you have your kind of chief product officer over here and your chief technology officer over here, and these hierarchies and silos that exist kind of make their way down to the teams, and they continue down. So there's almost this expectation that this is cross-functional or multidisciplinary here, but the hierarchical lines aren't supporting that. So in that article, they say team members align themselves with their management structure or functional leadership as their primary identity, instead of their value stream and what they're trying to do, creating this us versus them. Which leads to product throwing things over the fence. Engineers, you just have to build what you're told, right? You all love that, I'm sure, when that happens. Okay, so my third anti-pattern is X-led. So, actually, just one thing on that. One thing I've noticed on this, there's these structures that have started to build up around them. So if you hear like the whole kind of product ops thing, or engineering managers, which means something completely different in every single organization, building these kind of, pulling these cultures apart as well. Right, so X-led. X-led is where an organization says, we are led by blah. We are policy-led. I do a lot of government work. Engineering-led, product-led, data-led, hippo-led. Obviously, this is the highest person's opinion. The problem, so you have, does anyone have that in their organization? Are they technology-led, something-led? Few nods. So I did a little bit of research to say, what are people saying about these X-led organizations? And I have 3 examples. The first one is from a blog post that talks about engineering-led. So this is a very angry engineer, I think, that wrote this blog post. And they said, at places where engineers aren't in charge, it feels like they're just blindly applying the bog standard operating procedures of the industry. So they're like, no, this blog post is called Why Engineers Should Seek Out Engineering-Led Companies and How to Find Them. So they've had some very bad experiences. And that's, it's fine, and maybe you want to work somewhere with an engineering culture. But if you're only engineering-led and you're not considering, what is our needs of our users and what's the business need, you could just be making stuff and putting it out there. And I've seen organizations that do that. They build, put stuff out there. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we break things or break our users. Or doing very kind of upfront technical design and not allowing for iteration. I've also seen organizations that do that. So data-led. So this is from a white paper called 5 Steps to Becoming a Data-Driven Organization. And they say, you should be data-led because it can lead insights that drive success without any restricting factors or preconceptions. So to them, data-led is the way to go. Now, the problem with being data-led is if you only think about data, data will tell you stuff is happening. It may point to something going on, but it doesn't tell you why that's happening. It doesn't tell you why it's going on. Working in UK government, I remember there was a story about passport renewal. Lots of people were going through the passport renewal service, and they were dropping off halfway. And it's like, this must be something, what's going on? We can see people are going through this, and they're dropping off. Only when they started to talk to people did they realize the reason they were dropping off is because the price was only talked about halfway through the service. So, we know something's going on. Then we find out why. We just move the price to the beginning. No one needs to drop out because they're not going to go through the service until they're ready to pay. So product-led. So product-led organizations, that's a hot topic, I think. This is from a book called The Product-Led Organization. And they say, product-led organizations, they represent the future of business in a digital-first world. So you can read any one of these posts and say, no, we have to be this, and we have to be this, or we have to be this. So there's lots of different viewpoints about why their X-led is the best, and you should do that. I have seen product-led organizations that become very, it's not intentional, but product managers become in charge of everything. And they become I've seen organizations that create these little kind of kingdoms around their products. They don't talk to each other, people can't move across. It becomes very much a kind of battlefield between products. So if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you look at something through one lens, you're always going to look through it through that lens, and you're always going to make decisions through that single lens. And that means you're missing the other bits. Okay. So some problems with these anti-patterns. So I've talked about one role across many teams, I've talked about product versus engineering wars, and I've talked about X-led. So this whole talk's in 3s. So I did 3 of those, I'll do 3 problems, and I'll do 3 things that you can think about doing. So the first thing is that one group holds the power. So in if one group holds all the decision-making power, it makes it very difficult for other perspectives and other views and other ways of thinking to get involved. So in our first example, Anita, she didn't, as a designer, she had no power at all. She's just doing what other people put in the backlog for her. She's got no decision-making power. She just doesn't have the time. In the second, product versus engineering wars, there's a battle between the two. Who's making the decisions? And I'm sure I've definitely been in meetings where everyone's butting heads about, we need to do it this way, no, we need to do it this way, and it's a constant battle between the two. And in the X-led anti-pattern, it's the X that holds the power. So all decisions end up getting made through those kind of lenses. It also reinforces professional protectionism. Now, this term, professional protectionism, I came across this when I was first trying to kind of understand some of the things that I'd seen in organizations. And it comes from healthcare. And it kind of describes, these are my boundaries, this is my area, this is my power, this is my profession, you can't do it. Like, I do this, you can't do this. And it's, people holding on to their profession at kind of the expense of anyone else getting involved. And I recognize that behavior in a lot of places. I was working with an organization recently, and they said they had a user research team. They said the user research team doesn't want to publish how it does user research because they don't want anyone else doing it. So we're like, this is ours, you can't touch it. Do people recognize this behavior? A few nods around the audience. So this is this is where one of the places that I reference to get this term. So this is called Developing Professional Identity in Multi-Professional Teams. It's from the Academy of Medical Royal College. So they say if an individual has an overly rigid professional identity, it leads to poor team working and resistance to change. And this as well, and even bullying behaviors towards those they consider different. So people kind of shut down. So they say things like, for example, if a particular medical test is seen as part of someone's professional role, ceding this task to another person can feel like loss of status, authority, responsibility, or experience. So it's like it's losing your power if you start to let other people get involved and do that thing. I think it's particularly true if you have a particularly hierarchical organization, or if you have, we were talking about ranking earlier, if you have grades and it's very kind of, people kind of hold on to their grades and their professional identity in that way. And this is backed by existing power structures. So, lots of organizations, people hold power because they traditionally have, or maybe they hold budgets. Budgets is one way I find, the moment someone gets a budget, they're not incentivized to collaborate with anyone else. So this kind of thinking is backed by existing power structures. And when I was doing this talk, or first writing this talk at the end of last year, which is post-pandemic, I was like, I'm sure that some of this is also to do with how our behavior and how we think about ourselves after something like the pandemic, which shook a lot of us, which changed our working patterns, which changed how we are perceived in the workplace, or how we think we're perceived in the workplace if we're working from home or working over video, for example. So this post from Time talks about 4 ways in which the pandemic changed how we see ourselves. And they talked about this idea that isolation tested our sense of identity because it limited our access to in-person social feedback. And definitely at the beginning of the pandemic, people were like, you need to kind of make sure people know you're there, that you're doing work, or if you're working from home. There's a kind of period, maybe it's still going, where managers are people adding value? What is it that they're doing? And this kind of created this, I think, a reinforcement of professional identity and how we see ourselves in the workplace. And more than anything, what encourages this holding on to our professional identity in this way is incentives and rewards that organisations give. So if you get rewarded, you might get, oh, so-and-so has been so brilliant on this team, and individual kind of praise in that way, it leads to people behaving in a way that's quite individualistic. So a company's culture of rewards and incentives do really influence how people behave. Back to those kind of power structures. And it causes in-team silos. So does anyone feel that they have silos within their teams? A few folks. So a siloed team might look like a team, but you have work handed off between roles. So you might look like a team, but you're like, I finished my bit, now I'm going to give it to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, until the tester gets all the blame at the end, or deployment gets all the blame at the end somewhere. So in team silos, work hands off, hands off, hands off. It can mean having more people than you need on a team. It can lead to one person being the blocker and blamed for stuff, and it can lead to people waiting around because they can't work on certain things because they have very specific roles. I was talking to someone last week who told me in their organisation they needed to create a 4-page static website, and they were like, well, we need a front-end developer, back-end developer, a content designer, a product manager, a delivery scrum master, etc., etc., etc. And it's like, it's a 4-page website. But no, everyone's got their own individual role, so you have to have that many people. And this doesn't really help us when we are trying to solve wicked problems. So wicked problems are problems that we don't know the answer to. Most of our work, there isn't one answer. We don't know the answer. We're trying things out. We're iterating to find our way through. There's a book by a guy called David Epstein called Range, and Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialist World. And he says, in a wicked world, relying upon experience from a single domain is not only limiting, it can be disastrous. So if we keep in our own lanes and we don't collaborate with others, and we don't transfer knowledge across different roles, across different experience, it can be disastrous. So it's important to know this, different domains, experiences, and views of the world bring diversity to solutions, making them more rounded. So that's our different views, that's our different experiences. It means less blind spots. It means creating things that better serve our customers and better serve our users because we have a more rounded view of that. If you think about patients who have complex needs, for example, are treated by teams of people with different viewpoints that bring different ideas to the table. There's a great website. Is anyone familiar with Draw Toast? Oh, a few. I was at an Agile conference last week, and everyone was like, yes, we use it all the time. Very different audience. So this is from a guy called Tom Wojcik, and he gets teams to draw how they make toast. And you think, oh, everyone makes toast in the same way. It's really easy. And it's about illustrating the fact that people have different models in their head about how we do things. And I pulled these out because I think it's a really interesting way of seeing how different people think about the world. So in the first one at the top, it's very procedural. There's some bread. You put it in the toaster. You butter it. You put it in someone's face. That's like number one. Number two is we're going to zoom out. We're going to look at the system a lot more. We're going to grow some wheat. We're going to grind it. There's a baker involved. Somewhere there's a loaf of bread. There's a slice of bread. There's a toaster. There's toast. Number three here. Does anyone make toast in a frying pan? See? Yeah, there's toast in a frying pan. There's a few of you that do. I wouldn't have, this is not part of my cultural context, this is not part of my experience. So it shows that there are different people, different experiences, bring different views of the world. When I was growing up, you made toast in an eye-level grill that you just pulled out. Anyone from the UK grew up at no. Toaster was a revelation, it was like, wow. And in number 4, it's really people-focused. There's this happy person. Look how happy they are about making toast. There's no people in, well, there's a baker, but there's no users in the top one and this one here. So it's very interesting to see that just something that you think is really simple, just bringing lots of different views and different experiences, brings a much more rounded idea of the world. So he says when people work together under the right circumstances, group models are much better than individual models. And he talks about merging unified system models. Okay, so I've talked about 3 anti-patterns. I've talked about one role across many teams. I've talked about product versus engineering wars. I've talked about X-led. I've talked about 3 problems, which is one group holding the power, reinforcing professional protectionism, and creating in-team silos. So I'm going to give you some things that could maybe create a better way. At organisational level, talking about team structures, and then talking about some of the things you can think about doing if you're in a team and you have less influence over the organisation. So the first one, if you have the influence to do this, is to create enabling organisational structures. I think a lot of these problems come from how your organisation is set up and the incentives and rewards around that. So this is also from this diagram is the kind of the follow-up to the first one from the same blog post by Rick Kick and Kennedy Collins, is this idea of creating one team at all levels. So your C level are a team. They're their kind of team, first team. Your next level down are a team, your next level down are a team, your next level down are a team. This kind of incentivizes collaboration, shared decision-making, and alignment across the different levels. Has anyone read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? It's okay if you haven't. It's a novel about organizational stuff. Always riveting reads. But 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is about a management team. It's a fable by Patrick Lencioni. And they talk about this first team principles where leaders prioritize supporting their fellow leaders, so the people across that same horizontal over their direct report. So your first team is the people at the same kind of leadership level as you, before the people that report to you, and that's their second teams. So that's one real way to kind of model and create collaboration across those different layers. That's just one way. The next thing is to build multidisciplinary teams. Now I really like, and I've worked in organizations where the teams are kind of truly multidisciplinary teams. So, it's not engineering or a team over there and product or a team over there. It really is, there's product and engineering and design and user research and everything that helps something very quickly move from ideas to value, basically. And again, I think multidisciplinary teams is something that comes from healthcare a lot. There's an example in the UK where it's standard practice with patients that have cancer to have their treatment plan discussed by a multidisciplinary team. So instead of just having, a person that's a specialist in a very particular part of the body, you have kind of a group of people with lots of different views and a holistic plan, which is what we want when we're ill. And similarly, when we're building stuff, having those different viewpoints, bringing different experiences and ways of thinking about the world to the table, creates something that's a lot more rounded. I think it's important to disaggregate disciplines from roles. So you probably all have a job title. Maybe it's changed several times. Maybe sometimes you're called one thing and then you're called another thing. But I think what happens more likely is we have all these disciplines, and disciplines being kind of areas of specialisms, and we might have data analysis or software engineering or test engineering or many, many more. And they're not actually completely coupled to roles. We are coupled to job titles or roles. So you might be a data analyst that also does a bit of software engineering and a bit of user research or a bit of product management. So kind of breaking out of those is a useful thing to think about. It's like, where do we cross over? Where's the value in crossing over? And how do we help collaboration and learning and passing that on, so we can take, when we're working in teams, we can take kind of full team responsibility for something. So it's not just, my bit, then your bit, then your bit. Again, from healthcare, I've got some definitions of conceptual models of team working. I found this is from this thing here, Understanding and Improving Multidisciplinary Team Working in Geriatric Medicine, obviously the first thing to go to, but I think it's very relevant. So I talk about multidisciplinary teams, and I thought, okay, that's our goal. Multidisciplinary teams are our goals, separate but interrelated roles, maintaining your own boundaries. But this also talks about interdisciplinary teams, which is where boundaries get blurred even more, and teams integrate closer to complete a shared goal, and even from there to transdisciplinary teams, where team members share roles and goals, they share skills, they allow others to learn and acquire new skills, and they're much more blended. And I read this and I was like, oh, my mind was blown slightly. I'm always thinking over here, and there's all these other definitions as well. I'm not saying you need to be here, but it's worth thinking about, like, where are we and where do we want to be? How much do we want to blur our boundaries? How much do we want to be learning and sharing with each other? And the third thing that you can try, so this is more about what can you do if you're in a team. So maybe you have less influence and control over the organisation or how teams are put together, but what can you do in your team? I wanted to put this in. This is Margaret Heffernan, if anyone is familiar with her. She's an organisational consultant. She says this: companies don't have ideas, only people do, and what motivates them are the bonds and loyalty and trust they develop between each other. So it's about that overlap, which is really important. And that's where the creativity and the innovation and all the good stuff happens. So to help with this, building shared team responsibility, first thing is that people are not interchangeable. Has anyone ever been managed by spreadsheet? Where you see, like, well, you're a developer, you just move over there, right? You're that role, you just do that. So people are not interchangeable. We are all different. We have unique experience, skills, things that we bring to the table. Anyone familiar with I-shaped, T-shaped, pie-shaped? Sometimes we talk about this in organizations. I is where you have a deep specialism. T is where deep specialism and broad generalism can do the actions on camera. And then pi is where you have two specialisms and a cross. I think that doesn't really talk about what we are. I think we're more of this. It's broken cone shaped. So we're more like this. We have lots of different specialisms at different levels. We have some deep ones, we have some shallow ones, we have things that we want to learn, we have things that we want to grow, we have areas we might want to move into, we may want to move on from our roles to something else. So I think this is a useful tool to think about. I have a blog post about this, where you can do this in your team and you can go, what is it how do we want to describe ourselves? How do we want to learn more about ourselves, what we're good at, what we want to get better at? How can we talk about ourselves in a way that helps us talk about us as a team? I've started to run this as exercises. This was from a conference I was at last week, where people were starting to put some information about themselves, hard to read, but some people were saying, a chief engineer, agile as a specialism, but they wanted to develop more of their coding skills. Or this person here wants to get better at blogging. So this is also, if you do something like this, it's an opportunity to say, oh, so-and-so wants to get better at something I'm good at. Maybe we can pair on it. Maybe it's completely outside of the job role, but we can help each other, we can grow skills together. I think it's also good on these things to put some things that are not necessarily work-related. So someone has gardening, like things that you can learn more about each other, things that you enjoy. And to remember that we have squiggly careers. Most of us don't have linear career paths. Has anyone here got the same job they had when they first started working? One person. We have all this different stuff to bring to the table. You know, I went to art college. I spent 6 years at art college, and what that gives me is the ability to be observant, to take different concepts, to put them together, and to make slides that look quite nice, I think. But there's lots of things that I can take from something, a completely different sector, and bring into my everyday. So I just wanted to finish, really. I've talked about anti-patterns, I've talked about some problems, I've talked about maybe some things you can think about approaching these things. I mean, it's all dependent on your own situation. You can try lots of things out and see what works for you. But I think only by true collaboration, empathy, and shared responsibility, you know, can we work as teams, and we can create things that make everybody happy, both in our teams and our users. Actually, my friend made me put at one point most of the time here, which I took out because I thought, no, happy all of the time. So I just want you to think about that. And thank you. I think we have some time for some questions.
Thank you very much, Emily. Let's jump into the questions on Slido. Okay, you have the link here behind my back, so if you want to add some more questions, we have around 6-7 minutes to answer those. So let's start with the first. I see layoffs make professional protectionism and silos worse. How can we fix this?
That's a big question, isn't it? Is that at organisations where people are leaving, and you're like, how do you... I don't know who asked that question. Is it someone here, someone online?
Who have posted the question? Here in the room, okay.
Do you mean the people that are left behind, or people going out to new things? So they're kind of trying to prove their worth and not be fired, basically. That's a hard question. I think some of that is also about what you want from the world. So, like, is it? I think you can be much more effective when you work with other people anyway. So if you can break down the silos from the people that continue to exist, how can you help that? Yeah, make your world better and make your job better and make you more effective. I need to think a bit more about that one. I think that's a tough one. We'll have a chat later, maybe.
Okay, the second question is really interesting. How to acknowledge individuals' efforts if not with individual incentives?
Interesting. Do you know, I've worked for an organisation recently that have no individual. I think there's a benefit in thinking about what people bring to an organisation and what they want to learn and how they want to develop in 3 different levels. So I think about things from as an individual. It is important. How do you grow as an individual? What do you contribute? How do you learn? Is useful. There's also, you know, what do you bring to delivery and bring to a team, and how do you learn like that? And there's also what do you bring to your kind of professional practice, and how do you help grow that? And I think it is useful to have all 3 of those teams. All 3 of those things. And I said I worked for an organisation that removed all individual objectives and make it very team-based. And then there's actually no room for people to go, how do I grow as an individual? Mm-hmm. I've also worked for an organisation where I helped them create a progression framework that started to move away from roles and more towards capabilities, and allow people to move across those as well. So they could see, how do I move from this to something completely different? Mm-hmm. And giving people those opportunities and those pathways to kind of develop individually. So I wouldn't take that away, I don't think. Thanks
a lot. And let's help Tom to answer questions. I'm a design lead and I don't have to serve multiple teams, but 6 to 10 projects in one team all the time. They refuse to hire more designers. What should I do?
apart from leave, no, I didn't encourage you to leave, obviously. I think this is a work in progress, flow-based question, actually. If you can limit how much stuff you're working on at any time and set expectations to the people asking you to do stuff, it helps protect your team for what they're doing, and it helps set expectations outside. I often find that if someone is asking your team to do something and they're like just expecting it to happen and you're like, yeah, we're going to do it as soon as we can, they will be sitting there waiting. It's like if you order a parcel on Amazon and it says it's going to get here tomorrow and it gets here in 3 days, you're like, oh, Amazon, where's my parcel? But if Amazon tell you they're going to deliver your parcel in 3 days but you get it tomorrow, you're like, this is brilliant. Or if they tell you get it in 3 days and you get it in 3 days, you're fine. So some of it is about a bit of scheduling, a bit of work in progress, and a bit of managing your time and reducing the amount of context switching you need to do at any one time is probably aside from leave, is probably the thing that I would look at doing.
That sounds great. It's time to finish the Q&A, but I think you will be here today, Emily. So if you want to ask some questions from her, just look for her in the crowd. So I would like to ask a big round of applause for you. And
thank you. Hey.